So hello and welcome everybody to the second installment of the PPBSO webinar series, PPBSO in Conversation. And today we have Kate Dudek and Peter Sinclair and Calum MacDonald joining myself. My name is Tyler Bridge, and we're going to talk about making recordings for online competitions. Calum, Peter, and Kate are all regular judges in Ontario and abroad, and have had experience judging online competitions as well as making videos for online competitions as well. So we're going to be chatting about a bunch of things. I'm going to start by just talking about some of the Zoom webinar functions. So for those of you that have joined a Zoom call before, I'm sure that's most everybody, this is a little bit different in that it is a webinar. So you will be unable to start your video or your audio at the beginning. And if you have any questions to ask, there is a Q&A function at the bottom. So the chat is disabled, but the Q&A is active. So if you have any questions as we go along, you can type those in, and we'll get to as many questions as we can over the course of this session. So hopefully that makes sense. And if anyone would like to speak their question, you can enter that into the Q&A session, and I can allow your microphone and bring you in, and you can chat. So we might have some time for a few of those as well. So we'll kind of get started. This is a hot topic these days, and there's been quite a few online competitions that have already happened and been successful. So many people entering these online contests all over the world. More sign-ups, I think, for some of these contests than we would have seen otherwise, because it is so easy. Just make a video and send it in. But there's certainly some challenges that we've been seeing, and some challenges that judges have brought up, in that the recording quality tends to be very hit and miss. So you get this contest where people are submitting videos of different qualities. So we're going to talk about some things that will affect the quality of your video, and it's not necessarily just how much money you spend on your microphone. So lots of different things, and especially, you know, if all you have is a cell phone, there's certain tips and tricks that we'll go over that will let you make some better quality recordings. So I'm going to go through my list, and as I touch on each topic, I'm going to ask Calum and Kate and Peter to weigh in on things. And this checklist that I'm going through will also be made available when we post this online on YouTube. We'll have the checklist listed there, so you can go through the points that we discussed on your own when you go to make your own competition videos. So first thing on my list is location, and this has to do with where are you going to make your recordings. And obviously there's kind of two main choices for bagpipes and drums and loud instruments. Are you going to play inside or outside? Sometimes you don't have a choice, so it is made for you. If it's pouring rain outside, you're probably going to go inside. If you live in an apartment with neighbors that don't like bagpipes, you'll probably have to go outside. So things to consider, there's pros and cons to both of them. So the outside location, there's no unwanted reverb generally. I mean, unless you're in a weird concrete area. So your instrument is a lot more kind of natural sounding. The open space, it's going to dissipate quicker, but it's going to sound a little bit more dry. So there's less kind of unwanted reverberations. You can find a spot where you're not disturbing anybody, which is great. However, you might have some unwanted noise. So if cars are going by, if there's a wind in particular is a big thing that people don't necessarily consider. So you're making your video and you don't notice that there's a slight breeze, but the slight breeze going across the microphone, you know, it gets sort of a scratchy sound, and can really interrupt the playing and being able to hear what you're producing.
Sometimes you can put a sock over your microphone to help.
Yeah.
That. type
Yeah.
of background noise.
So if you have an external microphone, definitely, there's windsock things that you can put on that will help with that. With a cell phone, it might be a little bit more difficult. You may have to rig something up and find out exactly where the microphone in your cell phone is, but not cover the camera. But there are ways to help with that, the wind noise reduction. So if that's the only option you have, or also try to find a sheltered spot. But certainly, you want to make sure that you don't have any unwanted wind noise there. And of course, the weather plays a factor. So, for pipers and, drummers alike, if it's raining, if it's cold, if it's super hot, it'll affect your instrument. So it's not the same kind of controlled environment. If you're inside, like I said, it's more controlled. There's no wind noise. Make sure you shut off any fans or other things, dishwashers in the background, etc., that are kind of making a constant background noise. And when you're inside, you want to make sure that you try different rooms to find the room that you like the best sound of. Rooms with carpet, with medium to higher ceilings are the best. And the thing to keep in mind is that parallel hard surfaces will create more reflections. So a small room with lots of parallel hard surfaces will be really, really bouncy, may not be the sound that you're going for. And as you can see, the room I'm in, that I play my bagpipe in, I've got a bunch of foam and stuff on the walls to kind of break up that parallel surface. It's still not ideal in here, but it certainly helps. So in terms of location, I'll kind of open things up and let's maybe go around. We'll talk to Peter and Kate and then Calum. And what sort of things have you guys found with location being a contributing factor as you're judging contests? So Peter.
Well, I think you touched on a few of the items. People thought it might be nice to play outside, but the wind was a big factor in many of the recordings. I had someone who thought it might be nice to play on their deck. One part into it, the neighbor started the lawnmower and ran it through the entire performance. I think I was more shocked that people didn't review their recordings prior to submission. Clearly, had they done that, they would have said, this isn't very good. I better redo this. And I would recommend to everyone that you do have the opportunity, not like a live performance, you do have the opportunity to, eliminate mistakes, eliminate chokes, eliminate squeals, and submit your best performance. To my knowledge, there's not a rule that says you can only make one recording. I think you can record it as many times as you want and make sure you submit your premier performance of your choice. I'm sure Calum can follow up with some other things that he heard, but I heard people recording garages and it sounded like they were in a garbage can. Just clearly, not a lot of thought put into, the environment. And I think, what Tyler's trying to get across to everyone is, this is important. So with that, I'll turn that over to Calum at this point.
Hey, Peter. There's location is definitely of importance. And everything that you said, Tyler, people need to take into consideration. One of the recordings that I had was the child was playing in a family room and his little brother came walking by and went into the bathroom. Opened up the door, flushed the toilet, come right back out. So, you try not to take that into account, but it definitely affects what you're thinking at that point in time. But acoustics, echoes, like you talked about, Tyler, location, reverb, carpets, and any sort of things to change up, what could make your recording a bit better. It's kind of what I got there.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking more in terms of a drumming perspective, and there are different challenges from a drumming perspective that we can talk about a little later, I think. But in terms of big things for a really strong performance are also things like make sure your notifications are off if you're using your phone for recording, and so that you don't get that break or that ping or something in the middle of your performance. In general, for drumming, it will sound better outside, but I find I end up doing a lot of my recording inside as well, just because that's what's most available to me, and that's where my best microphone setup is.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing I'd like to mention, all of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, there's sort of one most important rule that I think everybody just needs to keep reminding themselves of, and it seems so obvious, but sometimes it's you forget to do it, and that is listen and watch your recordings start to finish, the whole thing through. It seems a little redundant, and I know for myself, I'll make a recording and I'm like, am I really going to sit here and pay attention for 5 minutes and watch myself? But yes, please do that. If you're submitting a recording for a solo contest and you think, yeah, that was a really good take, I think I really played that well, watch the whole thing start to finish, because if you check it and you go, yeah, that sounds pretty good, and you kind of fast forward through it and check a couple different points, you miss the things like, oh, you got a text message in the middle of it and your phone vibrated and you've got this zzz in the middle of your performance. Like Calum mentioned, as judges, they try to not take that into account and hold it against you, but it certainly distracts you from the task at hand when that happens. It takes you out of that moment of listening intently to the performance, and all of a sudden you go, what the heck was that? Why did that screen vibrate? And yeah, so at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your setup is, it doesn't matter where you record, anything like that, just listen and watch your videos start to finish and make sure that you're happy with that as being representative of your best foot forward at that point in time for that contest. So I think that's my biggest point. If you leave with one thing, please do that. So next on my list is, and we touched about this a little bit, equipment. So a lot of people are recording with cell phones. A lot of people have laptops and things as well. So in my experience, and Kate, you may be able to weigh in on this as well afterwards, but recording with a cell phone as opposed to recording with a built-in laptop microphone, it's generally going to be better to go with a cell phone. Cell phones, especially newer phones, the new iPhone series and newer Android devices, they're meant to handle sound, and they generally have built-in compressors and things that manage loud sounds better. So definitely, you can expect, if you have a good laptop, try it on your laptop, but also try it on your phone. You see all of these videos on Facebook and YouTube of players just in quarantine, and you think, man, that guy's got a really great sounding bagpipe, and it's just shot on a cell phone. Because these phones have compression, and they will take that loud sound and they'll squash it down a little bit without it being too distorted. And you can also get some good drone and chanter balance depending on the room that you're in. So certainly recommend that over the built-in microphones on most laptops. Yeah. Kate, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, a lot of cell phone technology has come a long way. And sometimes they'll even have dual microphones to make sure that they can cancel noise that they hear from one and that sort of thing. And if you're using a laptop, though, it would be worth considering something like this, which was about $60 or $80 or something from Best Buy. It's a USB microphone, and it works pretty well for recording, and you can adjust the gain on it. It has the slider on it, and it's not perfect, but a lot of different, sorry, it's probably affecting the sound, but as I move it around, a lot of microphones do have a gain slider or some kind of way to control the input gain, and that can be really beneficial to consider, especially for drummers. I find that if the gain is set too high, then it'll clip the sound, so you won't get the full body and resonance of it.
So Kate, for those people who are unfamiliar with the term, what is input gain?
Input gain is basically how much the microphone is increasing the volume of, increasing or decreasing the volume that it it records. So it could be actually like halving the volume. So your input amount, your input volume is actually decreased in amplitude, which is what they call the top to bottom of the waveform. Or sometimes the input gain can actually increase the sound and make quieter noises louder. When we're dealing with loud pipe band instruments, loud noises sometimes can't get properly, sometimes need to be decreased in gain in order to get the full sound. Otherwise it'll just, like if you look at the waveform, it'll just have a flat top instead of having the full shape that you want.
And then you get some distortion and other things in there that just make the sound unlistenable sometimes.
And you just don't have the nice harmonics that we love about bagpipes.
Yeah. So for Calum and Peter, with you guys having judged some of these contests, have you experienced that from some of the recordings that have been submitted? Have they just been like way too loud and distorted and kind of peaking that input gain?
Yes, for sure. Many of them were in that I would call unlistenable, where I totally discounted the sound as part of their performance. It obviously made them, I guess, ineligible for a prize, since one part of the contest was unjudgeable. So again, I think the key is do your homework. If you have to record 10 times, record 10 times, but record the best of the 10. It's not like a live performance where there shouldn't even be any nerves involved, right? I mean, you're basically practicing and making a recording. I think that's would be one of my recommendations to competitors.
Calum, what are your thoughts?
Calum, you probably had the same kind of experiences that I did.
Yeah, and what I found too was many competitors felt as though you had to face the camera, so it was full chanter right at the camera, and you would just get total chanter sound. It was very obnoxious. You couldn't hear drones or a balance thereof. And with some competitors, they took it into consideration. They would turn a little bit. With my son Liam, I insist that he be totally perpendicular to the camera, and if anything, you still have to show your hands. So you need to see fingers moving. You might see it from a side angle, but you got to have a balance between drone and chanter. And I like where you're going with the microphone, Tyler and Kate. That you could theoretically be on a 45 to the camera, yet have your recording device behind you or off to the side of you, bringing more of a balance. It should be a bit more drone and then chanter.
Yeah, and with drumming, it's a little bit different because I know that other snare instructors I've spoken to have also indicated this, but drummers should be facing the camera with their hands visible. In terms of the video, it doesn't necessarily mean the mic placement has to be right in front of you if that's not the best place for a mic, if you have that option.
So yeah, this ties nicely into my next point, which is camera and microphone placement. And certainly microphone placement becomes much more flexible when you have an external microphone. So one of the things, I've been thinking a lot about this the last week preparing for this, and I thought to myself about how much money I've spent on drone reeds in like the last 5 years. It's sickening how I've played every drone reed on the market. And I'm thinking, well, if I'm going to invest money in trying different drone reeds and getting a drone reed that sounds good, and think about how much even a set of easy drones is $100. For less than that, you can invest in getting a microphone that's going to improve your online contest sound. And the way it's looking is that online contests are kind of going to be here to stay. Whether they become the only fixture for competition, I don't think they will, because eventually we'll get back to doing things in person, which is nice. But for now, it's the outlet that we need, and certainly moving forward, it will be something that will be available in addition to the traditional in-person contest. So, just like you'd spend money on a good pair of tenor sticks or, a couple pairs of drumsticks and trying different drumsticks, it's certainly worth investigating, getting a half-decent USB microphone. As Kate said, like $60 is a decent one that lets you move it around the room. And then you can really, we can sit here and talk about what we recommend for mic placement, but you have to experiment and find what gives you the sound that you are going for. So certainly microphone placement. Now, question for Kate, Calum, and Peter. If you just have a cell phone, as Calum mentioned, a lot of competitors thought I have to be faced directly at the camera. From a judging perspective, if a competitor sent in a video where they were not facing the camera, but you could still see what their hands are doing, like let's say that they put the camera up high, kind of a little bit of a bird's eye view, but to kind of get that out of the direct line of the chanter, or from a drumming perspective, if they placed it somewhere off to the side that maybe got more off the side of a bass drum, but you could still see what their hands are doing, would that still be acceptable to you? Let's start with Kate.
Yeah, definitely for a bass drum, I'd actually want to have the microphone placed at facing one of the heads of the drum. Ideally, for bass or tenor specifically, a microphone being about 6 inches away from one of the heads, either top or bottom, left or right, is ideal. Bass drumming is a little tricky because potentially you could actually have the video so you can see both hands, and the audio should be not from the shell and not from the corner of the shell, but from one of the heads, which potentially gets into issues where maybe you actually use 2 cell phones, one for audio and one for video, and then use some mixing software to put them together, but that can get into risks with synchronization as well.
Yeah, and that's another thing we'll touch on a little bit. So for Calum and Peter, did you guys see any videos submitted that you really liked the sound of, and were you able to see where they placed their microphone?
Peter, you going first?
No, Calum, you go.
Okay. I did see a couple of competitors, and like I was mentioning earlier, they did have it off to the side. And I couldn't exactly see it, but if you looked at the angle they were placed, it was a bit more of a balance. Something we haven't talked about either is, what consideration does the judge take into factor? If you have a bad recording and you have a great recording, how do you balance that out? I think starting off, there were conversations between judges, and you were very kind of easy on judging the instrument, more focused on the musicality and the technique. But as recordings become better, it influences what you hear. And I think you really do have to take that into consideration now. And with the cell phone at a bass, it can produce a pretty good sound. But again, it's about that placement. And if somebody's got it front right on and somebody has it, perpendicular, I'm going to favor the perpendicular over the front right on.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Calum. I think, we had people recording from, I would say, as many as 20 feet away. They would have their cell phone. And that was kind of too far away. And then we had, the ones who would have it, maybe 3 feet in front of them. So the placement is critical, and I think the best ones were what we're recommending here are, kind of when you're half cocked away from direct contact with the microphone, and those seem to produce the best sound. And again, the variances between quality is just, I don't know how many, Calum, I think we both did roughly 100 recordings, and I can honestly say I had everything from outstanding to rotten recordings, quality of recording, and everything in between.
Peter, I think it was more like 202.
It felt like 202.
So this kind of brings me to my last big point on the list, and this is more my own personal thinking on it. You know, as a competitor, this is how I approach it. Certainly, it may not work for everybody, but we'll kind of get Kate and Calum and Peter, your take on this. And this is that there's a bit of you have to change your mental game up a little bit, being an online competitor. And personally, I feel like it's for the better, because any top level competitor that I've spoken to makes recordings of themselves and listens back to it. It's something I hate doing, but I will do, and I do more and more of it now. But I think changing how you approach these competitions is important. And one of the things to consider is that you are practicing how to make your recordings as much as you're practicing the music aspect of it now. And once you get good at making your recordings and you've got your space set up and your sound is clear, then it's easy. So, a couple things is get your setup and your method of recording down to a science. Get where you like it. And you're going to have to experiment. You're going to have to try different rooms, different mic placements. You may have to invest a little bit of money in getting some equipment. But whenever you get your bagpipe out of the box, or your drumsticks out, or anything that you do on your instrument, record it. Have a place set up, keep it as set up as you possibly can, so that where you practice is where you record. And throughout the week, you just record your practice sessions in your civvy clothes, and the important thing is to listen back to them and say, oh, I liked where the microphone was that day, or, I was standing a little bit more to the left and I liked that sound better. So you're listening back throughout the week, and then when it comes time to make the actual recording for the contest, this is where people can psych themselves out a little bit. And I always heard it referred to as red light fever. So when there's that little red recording light turns on, people kind of, oh my goodness, it means something now, even if you could throw that recording away. So for me, I would pick a single day, make sure you've eaten some food, put your uniform on, get your instrument warmed up, get your hands warmed up just like you would in any other contest, and then record your contest repertoire. And as Peter mentioned many times, there's no rule that you can only do one recording, but certainly from the mental aspect of things, I would recommend that you don't get too caught up in making too many recordings. We're always our own worst critic. You're going to listen back, there's going to be something that's not quite right, but what I tell my students is this is a representation of how you're playing at this point in time. This isn't how you're being judged for the rest of your life. So you're submitting something for feedback from accredited judges as part of a contest. And there's always things to improve on. So just don't get too caught up in making recordings, and make sure that you practice making your recordings. So, Kate, do you have anything?
Yeah, I guess the one thing that I would add to that is potentially just turn your camera on and don't turn it off in between takes, just so you can keep once you know your setup is good, then you're not sort of walking back and forth between the record button and the place that you're set up. If you totally screw up really badly and it's for sure a bad take, just, do some type of visual cue so you can find it again, and then just say the beginning piece of what date it is and what contest it's for again, and then play it again.
Yeah, you'd have to have some sort of video editing software to trim it though, but I think most phones
there are
have
some
that
good
option.
free ones that'll let you do trimming on you can get them on any cell phone app provider.
Cool. Peter, do you have anything to add about that, about just preparation?
No, I think I would I would recommend that, you don't have to do the one you record first time is not the one you have to submit, and keep that in mind while you're doing it. And you actually, I think everyone has the opportunity to submit, their best shot, not like a live performance where, you could be a nervous, competitor, and the live thing psychs you out. Where here you have the opportunity to actually spend your time, be comfortable, and produce the best performance you can. And really, there is no nerve factor involved, because in my mind, all you're doing is practicing with your kill time. That's the only difference.
I see that we have a question from Ellen Mole. Is it okay if I just answer that now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so Ellen, the way that we're making sure that, so Ellen asked the question, how do we avoid someone submitting the same video over and over? Should they state the date in their spoken intro of their name and the name of the tunes they're playing? Yes, exactly. That's what the PPBSO is requiring, is that they state, I believe it says it in the instructions, but it's your name, your tunes, the date of the contest this recording is for. And is that... you're nodding, Tyler. I think that's it. But basically, you say that, and then in one continuous take, you do your performance. Yeah. So that you can't just record new intros and then put them in. I mean, that's the low tech solution, and I think it's a good one, because we should be used to knowing what our tunes are and being able to speak them clearly.
Definitely.
Hey, Tyler. Oh, Tyler,
Yep.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
That's one of the most important points that you guys just brought up. Competitor has to say their name, and they have to say their tune. I bet you I had a half a dozen, if not more. 3 of them were P-Brooks that the tune wasn't mentioned. So I could have been bad judge and just wrote them off. But you're really using your resources to page up a P-Brook while they're starting. And you're trying to get yourself on, organized. And then you're taking a guess at some of the marches or your spays or reels. You're hoping that you put down the right one. Most of the time, I mean, we know tunes, we just don't know every single one. So very important to put that down, name and the tunes that you're playing.
I would agree with that. And I think the other thing, and I don't know if Tyler, that we're requiring this, but the contest that Calum I did, the competitors had to not only state their name, or they were supposed to state their name, the tune, they also were supposed to state when it was recorded, date and time. Now, I don't know how critical the date and time recording is, although I guess it could eliminate people submitting, a second or third submission.
Definitely, yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think we want to try to, some people will try to cheat the system, and technically if you have the right editing software, you could edit and put a different intro in and make it look like it's the same video and submit the same. Right. But what's the point there? You're not gaining anything as a competitor. You're not learning anything there. So but
hey, Tyler, something else real quick on that same thought was, as judges, we have talked amongst ourselves. We try to treat it as we would a normal competition. So it's one take only on the video. You can't keep going back 3 and 4 times and then go back to competitor number 1 and compare it to competitor number 2. I mean, you could, but I think most of us have made a decision to do a one take only and then carry on out of fairness to the competitors.
And when you've got 100 competitors to get through, that may be what you have to do. Certainly I've thought of that myself. If I'm sitting judging a contest, am I going to do just the once each, or am I going to do once each? And then maybe I've got 2 that are really, really close, and I might go back and listen to those 2 again, like if I'm not quite sure. But yeah, that's interesting. Calum and Peter, have you talked to other judges, or is that kind of the norm?
I think I try to treat it like a live event. One listen to each player, and I try to write a sheet in the normal time span that would be allotted. And when I first sat down with this thing, I said, okay, I've got an event here with 20 competitors. I should allot, X amount of time for that, and try similar to the games where, if you started a contest at 9 o'clock and you're supposed to be done at 10, it might push to 10:05 or 10:10, but without that discipline, the temptation to go back and listen to a competitor more than once, or to reevaluate the prize list, that opportunity would creep in if you didn't have that discipline. And that was not recommended to us. That was just something that I felt was fair for the competitors, to treat this as a live event, even though it's obviously recorded.
Nice. That excellent point. Fantastic. I'm going to scoot ahead here. We've got a couple questions coming in. Trish, I think Trish Kirkwood there, has asked, is there any benefit to marching while playing in the march contests, or can the competitor remain still? Will they be penalized for not marching in the march event? So my immediate thought is, if you spend the time to get that mic placement correct and get that balance of drones and chanter, don't move. You can march in place. Certainly I would march in place playing my march, but and even PBROC contests too, the pipers wander in PBROC contests, and it changes the sound of the instrument as you go. So it might not be a bad thing. Like if you ever listen to recordings of the Glenfiddich Championship, certainly the pipers march and you can hear their bagpipe change as they move in the room. But those are also several microphones placed throughout the room to make sure that you've got a capture there. Certainly I would not penalize someone for not marching, especially if they have a good drone chanter balance in the mix of their recording. Yeah. What are thoughts from Calum and Peter?
Hey, Pete, I'll jump in here.
Yeah.
Man, I've gone back and forth on this subject with my son, and one round of videos was in place, but then the other ones were marching. And yeah, I would stay in place over marching. Totally different sound all the way throughout.
Yeah, I think the majority of the marches that I did judge were people that played in place. The ones that did choose to march, the sound was obviously distorted, especially when they walked away from the microphone. So I would recommend that everybody just, remain in place. Hopefully people are going to spend quality time on mic placement, recording the devices, etc. So I would recommend stay in place. A lot of the existing rules, I guess, don't count anymore in our new world. So I would say, remain in place, and don't march.
Hey, Tyler.
Yeah.
Tyler, can I jump in real quick? Same would hold true for PBROC. I know our tendency is to wander, but if you get optimal sound position, stand still.
Yeah.
Definitely. So we've got a question here from Charles David Mitchell. He says, for online piping contests, will there be an impact if we take a long time to get our drones in tune? Will it be treated like the in-person contest with a time limit of 3 or 4 minutes? And my initial thought is I wouldn't care if a competitor took longer, because you can fast forward through the tuning, especially for a PBROC contest. It might be beneficial to, it's tricky. Like from a piping perspective, I would never stop my bagpipe when I think it's in tune and then say my tune name and say I'm about to play and then start up again. So you'd have to find a way, especially in PBROC, to really make it clear in your video when you're starting your tune. And that might just be that, you're off to the side and you're not really in the full frame of the shot. And then when your bagpipe is singing, you get into your position and maybe you look directly at the camera, and just like you would make sure that the judge is aware that you're about to begin in a real contest, start your tune. From a judging perspective, I would definitely ride that fast forward button.
Yeah, and I'll jump in on this. We had, I did exactly that. I fast forwarded through the tuning, but a lot of people had someone turn the mic on or the recording device turned it on when they were done tuning. So there was maybe, a 10, 15 second buffer between where someone had turned the recording device on for them. So if you have someone available, I would recommend that rather than, record the entire setup, tune-up session. But I did find myself fast forwarding through that, which I wish I could do live.
Yeah. So there's a few other things that I want to touch on just before we kind of wrap things up in the next few minutes. There were some kind of broader questions that I had for you three, and I sent them to you yesterday in advance. We've touched on some of the things, but I think this will answer some of the questions that I've just seen come in through the Q&A. And the first one is, what advantages, if any, are there to entering an online contest versus one conducted in the traditional manner? So for moving forward beyond our COVID restrictions, as judges, do you see there being advantages to some players to being able to enter an online contest kind of anywhere in the world?
I'll go. I think a big thing for the performer is that you can just do as many takes as you need to really submit your best work. And so in that respect, nerves don't play the same factor that they do. Like Peter had said, maybe you just do it several times until you stop feeling nervous about it and your adrenaline is out of your system, and then you'll just nail your best performance. And it's funny, this is sort of the opposite of what had just been discussed earlier, but for judges, the ability to pause or potentially go back and check something is something that I consider an advantage. And from an organizing perspective, there isn't a way to know if the judge watched the video 2 times or went back and looked at, made sure that the second part wasn't played 3 times instead of 2 or something like that. So that's why there isn't any restrictions on that. So basically judges can make their own call as long as they're doing the same thing for everybody, I guess. And scheduling is a good thing as well. It's a big advantage because you can make your video when it makes sense for you. You don't have to be at the games at 8 a.m. if you're a night owl.
I think this is an excellent opportunity for competitors to keep on top of their game. Without this, people would be sitting around all summer with nowhere to go, nowhere to compete. So I think this is a good thing for competitors. It keeps them active, keeps them sharp. I don't think anyone really wanted to just wait till Georgetown next summer. I think this is a great opportunity. There's also down in there's a bunch in North Carolina right now looking to do an online mini band contest. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. According to what I've heard, there's 28 bands who are interested in participating. So I think the opportunity for this thing to explode, between now and whenever we can come back out and play, I think it's endless, the opportunities for competitors. I mean, even for judges to not be active is not a good thing for us either. We need to remain as sharp as the competitors. So I think this is a great thing for us right now. We really don't have any other options, and I think this is an outstanding way for us to all keep in the game and keep sharp.
Nice. So I have one more question, which is kind of tying in a few of my questions, and I think this is really important, and that is, how much of an advantage do you feel as a judge a competitor will have if they have a superior sounding recording? So if they have better recording equipment and their recording just sounds better, how much of an advantage is that? Or would a lesser sounding recording with better playing perhaps still be able to win the day? And this also ties into some questions that I've been getting, and see there's one from Peter there about post-processing. So basically, if you make a recording, there's some background noise or there's something you don't quite like about it, you got a weird kind of honky mid frequency in there, and you want to go in and kind of take that out of your recording a little bit. If you have the tools to edit that, certainly you're not necessarily affecting the performance of the tune, but affecting the recording quality. And how much of a factor will that be? And then as a side question that I'll get Kate to answer, from a drumming perspective, this is almost something that's necessary because drummers need to play along with a piper. So if they don't have a physical piper available, what kinds of things can they do to mesh that piping and drumming recording together? And is that seen as fair or unfair for the people that can do that versus the people that can't? So I'll maybe open this up to Peter first, and then Calum to talk about piping, and then Kate about the drumming.
I think probably the answer is the same as if it would be a live performance where someone could play outstanding and have a so-so bagpipe, and someone who has an outstanding pipe may not be as good a player. So, that plays into a live. It also plays into the recordings. I think from my limited experience in this, the only piping that I totally had to discount were recordings that were just so poor that I couldn't decide if it was unsteady blowing, if it was completely out of tune. I mean, some of the recordings were just you just couldn't put any value on the pipe sound due to the poor recording. So I think it's not much different than what would happen real in a live contest. And then obviously, your bagpipe quality sound is also grade dependent, where, we expect much, much more out of a grade 3 player than a grade 4 player. So the sound, it is important, but I think you have to take into account that there are different recording devices, and the sound, unfortunately, and at least in my mind, the sound does not become as big a priority as it would in a live performance. That was a decision I made to be fair to everyone. So I found myself placing more value on execution, expression, those kind of things versus the sound became a smaller issue than it may have been in a live event. So Calum, you can follow up on that.
Yeah, I agree with Peter, and it's against what I feel and believe in my judging. For me, the sound of the instrument is number one, hands down, and then musicality of the tune, and then technique. But out of fairness to competitors, this is a new area for all of us, and you have to show a little bit of tolerance on somebody that doesn't have a great recording versus a phenomenal recording. But I do believe the rules of engagement are going to change. And even to what you said, Tyler, people that have savvy, programs that they can trim up their sound of their performance before they send in their audio. I think there'll be some set rules on that in the future as well. But Yeah, I've had to back off my judging format a little bit and show a little more tolerance on the instrument, unfortunately. But I hope that that will change moving forward as people become better at recording themselves. The quality will come back, and then we can. If you have 19 out of 23 performances that had really good instruments, there you go. Now it's an advantage.
All right, so for drummers, it's a little bit of it's a much trickier situation, especially in a pandemic, because when we don't have social distancing restrictions, you can actually get together with your piper and set up the sound the way that you need it to, and ideally for tenors and bass to also have your snare drummer in there. But I do recommend that you record along with something, whether it's a metronome, a recording of SFU, or a recording of your piper and drummer. Play along with something so that the judge can assess how well you're playing along with the thing that you're playing along, because that's part of the deal. If you're playing along with something that has drumming, make sure that what you're playing fits with it. You can't just play something to the same tune if you're a tenor drummer and have it not fit with the snare score, or play a different snare score than the band that you're playing along with is playing, if that's what you're doing. I know we're running out of time, so I just want to quickly go through a couple of the notes I had. Consider placing your accompaniment source closer to your mic to improve the balance, like to sort of mechanically improve the balance if you don't have any other type of mixing options. Like I have this sort of like Bluetooth mic, or Bluetooth speaker rather, so what I'll sometimes do is put that physically close to the microphone that I'm recording from, and then have a different device actually sending my accompaniment to this, and that can really help. Just having it much closer to your microphone, and then you can be further back. And it's also possible to use sound mixing software to increase the volume of the accompaniment track, but you have to really exercise caution. Don't screw it up, because if you screw it up, then it's way worse than not having messed around with it. And that sort of speaks to Peter Hummel's comment, is there aren't any rules against doing that right now, but if you screw it up and make it worse, then that's at your own risk. And basically your recording equipment is part of your equipment. That's how I consider it. If your drum sounds horrible in person, that will impact how you're assessed, or your pipes. And if your equipment makes your drum sound terrible, that's something to consider as well.
Yeah, you're gonna buy that set of drone reeds that's gonna be as stable as possible, just like you're gonna get a decent microphone. So I think that's important, Kate, investing in your setup. Kate, I'm going to get you to send me your points as well, so we can add them to the description of the YouTube video that we put up. Some excellent points for drummers to consider. So I think we're gonna wrap things up. I've got a couple things that I'd like to mention just at the end, and that is tomorrow at midnight is the deadline for video submissions for the first PPBSO online contest. You can register online just through the normal online channel, and the first contest is free. There's detailed instructions on the PPBSO website, but I believe it is open to all amateur grades, and just the light music to start with. So it's you make a video, you upload it to YouTube, and you send that link in to the PPBSO. And again, more instructions at PPBSO website. I'd like to thank Calum and Peter and Kate for joining me. It was a little bit of a last-minute request, but you guys have been absolutely fantastic, and having spoken or emailed back and forth with all three of you in the last week, it kind of clicked, and I was like, yeah, these are the people that I want to get in to talk about these, because you guys have the experience with it. So thank you very much for joining me today and joining this PPBSO in conversation. I'll mention we've got some more webinars coming up, so if you enjoyed this one or the one last Thursday with Finley MacDonald, we've got another one happening with Bill Livingston, and we're also going to be having Gordon Brown, who's the lead drummer of Bog Hall, coming in. Andrea Boyd is going to be hosting the conversation with Bill Livingston, and I believe we have Kyle Heaney hosting the conversation with Gordon Brown. So those two dates are yet to be decided, but definitely watch out for those coming up, and it'll be another Eventbrite registration to hop in on those calls. So really exciting stuff coming up. So thanks very much, everybody. We'll call it an afternoon, and all the best in your recordings this weekend for the online contests. Thanks.